Hello everyone and welcome to another Real Reflective Practice. I'm Dr Pereira, the Disillusioned medic, and as always, this live stream is all about having the open and meaningful discussions that we doctors often don't even realise that we crave. This isn't half-assed it because your educational supervisor told you to reflective practice. This is real reflective practice. So thank you all so much for joining me tonight. If you're watching from Facebook, please hit that like button. And if you're watching from YouTube, please do subscribe to this channel. Tonight, I have a couple of surprise announcements for you guys, which I am very, very excited about. So stay tuned for that. I will be sharing that at the end of the show. Hi, Hannah, welcome. So yeah, stay tuned for my special announcements. And our theme for tonight's discussion is exploration. So joining me a bit later to talk about that is my amazing guest, Dr. Errin Weisman. So I'm really looking forward to that. But I'd like to start this show with something a little bit different. I know I normally read out audience reflections in this beginning part, but today I actually have a question from a viewer who I'm going to call Returning Wanderer. So question rather than reflection, which is exciting. And so Returning Wanderer writes, "Hi Anjali, I'm back from Australia and about to start as an ED registrar. I occasionally think about a more straightforward life without countless nights and weekends, but I can't imagine going into another career at this age and stage in my life. 2 kids to feed and mortgages, etc. What sort of other careers have you realistically seen work for ex-doctors? All the best and hope you don't mind me picking your brain, Returning Wanderer." So thanks for your question, Returning Wanderer. And no, I don't mind at all, because this is actually a question that I get asked all the time from medics who are considering changing careers. They want to have an idea of what sort of jobs they might do, what their lives might look like, what they can expect in terms of financial remuneration, and also career progression and stability. And it's an absolutely fair question. I completely understand the desire to know the answers to those things. And, you know, I'm a parent too. I know that it complicates things. But you'll probably be aware that there are a lot of lists out there that you can Google for alternative careers for medics. My problem with these lists is that they'll have you believe that you can only choose from a limited number of options when it comes to changing career. And the biggest ones probably within the sort of medical sphere, they tend to be things like research or alternative therapies like physio, and the big ones outside of medicine tend to be, you know, management consultancy, pharma, you know, setting up your own business, entrepreneurship, that kind of thing. But quite honestly, I have met and interviewed and worked with so many successful ex-doctors who have a humongous variety in the things that they do. I've met successful writers, actors, entrepreneurs, as I said, tech geniuses, coaches, clinical UX experts, which is clinical user experience. I've met charity founders, I've met hairdressers. So it's incredible the variety that there is. And the list really does go on, which I think really reflects the fact that we are all individuals with, you know, unique skill sets and desires and characteristics. And, you know, I would absolutely love as a coach to be able to say to you, do this course or apply for this job. And that will make you successful and happy. But I would be making you false promises, because in reality, that is not, it's not a good way of going about it. It's not so much about asking what careers you should do. It's more about asking what you want and what you need from a career. And that is far more complex than it initially seems. And it's actually brilliant timing that you're sending me this question when we're talking about the theme of exploration tonight, because exploration is exactly what you need to start with when you're thinking about changing careers. So yeah, I think if you stay tuned and listen to this discussion, I think it might actually be really helpful for you to hear what Erin and I talk about. And yeah, thank you so much again for sending me a question. And if anyone else would like to send me a question, please do shoot it over to me. I would be glad to answer it on a future live stream. You can reach me at drangelipereira@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Disillusioned. So now it's time for me to tell you a story, as always. And as I mentioned just now, our theme for tonight is exploration. During med school holidays and for weekend visits home, I would get the train from Bristol to London, and I would travel east right the way across London. So I could get a train from the east of London to my hometown in Essex. Now, for the first couple of times I did this, I took the Circle and District line from Paddington all the way around to Tower Hill. And it was so slow and so tedious. But I knew that it was a way that would get me there, get me where I needed to go, without having to change a million times with my big suitcase and everything. So I just put up with it. But one day I got to Paddington and I found, to my dismay, that the Circle and District line was closed. At least the bit that I needed was closed. And I can't remember why. It might have been engineering works or some problem with the line. But in any case, it quickly became apparent that I would need to find some other way of getting across town. I didn't have the money for a taxi, and I didn't want to spend 3 hours on buses if I could help it. So here's what I ended up doing. I took the Bakerloo line from Paddington to Oxford Circus. Then I changed to the Central line and went to Bank. And then I got off the tube at Bank and I walked to Fenchurch Street Station. And the reason I knew that I could walk there was because I remembered, weirdly, from way back on a school trip that we'd done that walk, and I remembered the route. And it was a bit of a faff with my suitcase, but you know what? It was fine. And what's more, it was quicker and more interesting than my original route. And also, I really liked the refreshment of having a walk through, the bustling town of London. It kind of broke up the monotony of the journey a bit. And indeed, it became my go-to route, and I used it throughout all of the rest of my time at Bristol, really. And recently, I learned that I am not the only person to benefit from this phenomenon. In 2014, researchers from Oxford and Cambridge universities analysed commuters' Oyster card usage during a tube strike to see how they would change their travel routes in response to certain stations and lines being closed during the strike. And what they found was absolutely fascinating. Even after the strike had ended, 1 in 20 commuters ended up sticking to their new routes. Now, this may have been because the new route was more efficient, or perhaps they just preferred it and had never had the opportunity before to discover their optimal route. We all know that the actual distances on the standard tube map are pretty distorted, so it's impossible to know exactly how far stations are away from each other just from looking at the map. For example, Bank and Fenchurch Streets look like they should be miles apart on the map, but in reality, the distance is walkable. And what was even more fascinating from this research was that they actually found the strike ended up producing a net economic benefit. The amount of time that commuters saved in the long term actually outweighed the time that they lost during the strike. And it occurred to me that if nothing else, this was an argument for exploration. Whilst it may seem aimless and even inconvenient and frustrating at the time, being open to trying different ways of reaching your goal may actually end up being beneficial in the long term. So it's going to be really good to delve into this theme of exploration tonight. And I have a very special guest joining me all the way from Indiana in the US to do it with me. Dr. Errin Weisman is an absolutely incredible woman. She is a physician and entrepreneur, a life coach for doctors, and also the host of the amazing Doctor Me First podcast, in which she interviews kick-ass women in medicine. So if you're looking for an inspirational podcast to listen to, I would thoroughly recommend it. Erin is also the mother of two and an absolute force of nature. So I'm so honoured to call her my friend, and really, really excited to introduce you to her tonight. So Erin, welcome.
Hey, friend! It is so good to come across the pond and hang out with you.
I'm so excited to have you here tonight. Thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely. It's like mid-afternoon here. It's a bright, shiny day. I was just talking to my husband that I got to hang out with you today. I'm just so excited. Even though we can't travel right now, it feels a little magical like I have.
Yeah, it's almost like you're in the room. Erin, thank you so much for being here again. And I've been looking forward to this conversation ever since we planned it, because I really just want to share you with my network. So perhaps we could start off with you telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Ooh, girl, I am sass and pearls today. Let's just put it that way. You hit the bio so well. I'm a family medicine physician in the US. I found you through the magic of the internet, and I was like, "Oh my god. I have found my, alternate universe over in the UK." Because our stories were so similar. I think even the timeline perfectly lined up with, your realization that, hey, medicine is not my jam. And so a little bit about me, went through training, got out as a full-fledged physician, family medicine in rural Indiana in 2014. And within weeks, I was like, WTF, this is the next 30 years of my life. I can't do this. And of course, I had at the time 2 little babies at home, a scared husband, a shit ton of loan debt. And I felt so stuck and so lost, just like the person who asked that question, like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I am not from a family of doctors. We are definitely blue collar here in the US. And I started looking around and I'm like, okay, maybe I made a huge mistake. Maybe. So what can I do instead? And I was literally Googling, how do I turn my CV into a resume to try to figure this out? And just like probably many of your viewers are like looking for that magic bullet, like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Because staying here is not a possibility, not this. And what I found was just so many other hurting people in the same situation, but yet no real answers that I was like, okay, like I gotta figure. I started going for interviews at a car manufacturing company to work on the line. I
No way.
applied for a marketing position in a furniture company.
Oh
I I did this, and I would go into the interviews and they're like, "You're a physician?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's not talk about that." And what I realized, I really felt like I was crazy because I was talking to my med school best friends. I was talking to people I went through residency training with. I was trying to talk to my partners, but they were like 20 plus years older than me, so they didn't get it. And I was like, I know I'm not crazy. I know that this is not just like depression that I need a pill for. I know something is going on. And it was through, again, the magic of the internet. I found this site. She was a family medicine physician as well. And she was talking about like this transformational journey and that she had done it. And so let me help you. And when I started, so it was the first time I ever bought like an online program. I was like, hashtag take my money, whatever, that's fine. And I started doing it, and she started asking these like really deep questions. And like, I just like dove headfirst into it. And then I was like, I got to talk to this woman. And it was the first time I had ever heard about life coaching. And I got on the phone with her, and one of those moments in your life where you're like, okay, if I do this, I will be changed. That was what I felt like after I got off the phone call with her and she offered me coaching services. And
amazing.
that's where I really felt like I started what we're going to talk about today with exploration and transformation, is where I felt a fundamental shift in my life. And then the more I was going through coaching and like doing this inner work of like, where do you really want to be in 15 years? What do you really want to feel like when you wake up in the mornings? How do you want to go at bed? How do you want to feel at bed? That's when I looked around and I was like, Well, hell, where are all the like young physician female life coaches? Because we needed this shit like yesterday, like school, like as students, we needed this. And so that's exactly what it became 5 years ago. I was still practicing at the time, which I still practice now. It's just on my terms. But started life coaching, started training, started having conversations. And as that kind of evolved, what I realized is there aren't external answers for us to just like pluck out of a manual and be like, oh, you need this. Here's your prescription. Go have a happy life. The answers are within us, but we have to do the hard work of exploring it. We have to look in the dark corners, and we have to kind of go through all of our junk and heal old wounds before we can really like find what it is. Because how they told you the path through medicine would lead you to a happy life is wrong. The path towards medicine is like finding what that means to you and then chasing it down.
No, I love that, and I mean you're so right, and it's so funny, you know, that we're talking about exploration tonight because you talked about how eerily similar our stories are, but when I came on your podcast earlier this year, I chose the same theme. We chose exactly the same thing. I spoke about exploration with you then, and we're talking more about it now. So clearly, it's something that means a lot to us both.
Well, and I think we need to give more people permission to say it is 100% okay. Like, don't feel any shame around this. Get rid of your English guilt. I am here to tell you, like, let me help you with that. Let Anjali help you, because we all have guilt that we need to like work through, but also understanding like that doesn't have to be a part of your story anymore. And you can only do that if you like really look it in the face and name it and work through that.
I mean, I think for me, exploration means such a lot because I recognize how much I lacked it, you know, not just as a doctor, but even as a child and a young woman growing up. Everything I did was in the service of this larger goal. You know, I did have hobbies and interests, but I always felt like I had to make them count. You know, I couldn't just do music. I had to do music exams so they'd look good, you know, on my university application. And I couldn't just do a sport because it was fun. I had to make the team so I'd look like a good all-rounder. And I think as medics, we do tend to have such a culture of, you know, toxic productivity was something I heard somebody say on Twitter the other day. And I really liked that way of framing it. Like, you have to be able to justify everything that you do and, you know, and prove how it benefits your career. So when I left medicine without a plan and, you know, just fell off the proverbial cliff, I was not prepared. I had no experience of exploration, and I was really forced in the most brutal way to explore, and I would never recommend that for anyone else, but I was forced to try these new things without knowing where they were going, and, you know, go down paths that I didn't necessarily have any idea where they would lead. And now in hindsight, I can see that process would have been a hell of a lot less stressful had I planned things. I mean, I did the equivalent of taking a hike up a mountain without a tent or any food supplies or any outdoor camping equipment or anything, which I would never say is a good idea. But the actual exploration process itself for me was so formative and so fun. You know, it was refreshing to taste those new things, right?
Right. It's why we don't have hobbies, because we don't know how to do things just for fun without a purpose. And like, learning that is huge. And you know, you said you did it wrong. I don't think you did it wrong. I think you did it in the way that you need to do it at that point. Yes, and that's where I think both of us are at when we want to help people, is we want to catch them before they're like break dead point. It's this or that. And I think, because I think at some point we all, man, we hang on so long, so long. Like, this whole thing in the US, there's a lot of talk about resiliency training. Like, we need to help doctors be more resilient. And I'm like, that is bullshit. We are resilient AF, and we don't need any more of it because we hold on to the very, very end. We don't need more resiliency. We need more change. We need adaptation. We need exploration, and we need autonomy and choice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I hate resilience training. I think you would be very hard pushed to find a doctor who is not resilient. I mean, think of what we have to deal with on a daily basis. These are people who are incredibly burnt out by a system that abuses them. You know, they don't need, as you say, they don't need resilience training. They already have that, and it's other things that need to change. So I love that you say that. But it's funny because medics, I think, are so averse to this idea of exploration. It really scares us. And I mean, going back to the question that I had earlier from, returning wanderer, even without commitments like children and mortgages, medics are risk averse people naturally. We are planners. We need to know exactly where the journey's going and what's it going to look like. So, I mean, in your view and your experience, why are we like this?
I think it goes way back from when we all started on this journey. It's not like you just, okay, for most people, there are some people who are second career physicians and medics. But typically that starts when you're really, really young and you know the path. You get on the train tracks and it's like, okay, I do this and then I'm there. And then I do this and I'm there. And then if I follow the rules and I stay in the line, this is where it's going to get me. And then we get out into real world and then we realize there are no tracks in life. There are no right ways. And so I think we're set up from a pretty young age to be no, this is really how it is and this is how you should do it. And so to a very type A personality, I mean, let's just be honest, we're all perfectionists at some degree. You don't go into medicine and not be a perfectionist. It's not okay to half-ass a heart transplant. Just that's not good. And so part of our perfectionism is the doing it right. And I think that's where we do ourselves a disservice of not learning how to get into something and make a mess and say, I'm just doing this just to do it, not evidently to do it right. And I mentioned the hobby thing because, as kids, we just play and we do things and without thinking. And then somewhere along that juvenile journey, we stop that. And that was actually part of my burnout recovery was learning how to have fun, just to have fun, not for a purpose, not to bake cookies for all of my kids' classes or make a blanket for my best friend who's having a baby. And then everybody's having babies. So I need to make all these blankets. That's not a hobby anymore. And so that was part of learning, just do things imperfectly, do things just to do things. And my grandma taught me how to crochet when I was probably 7 years old. And so I found a cool pattern on Pinterest and I started crocheting that in 2014. And so many times I would have to pull, I'd mess up the pattern and have to pull it out. And I would get so frustrated and so mad with myself. But eventually I learned no, it's better. It's okay. There is no time on this. You can be 70 when you finish this, and that's okay. But it's just again recognizing that probably one of our greatest superpowers of being a perfectionist and being a hard worker can become our kryptonite if we're not aware of it.
Yeah, no, I mean I like that way of putting it, and I like that you talk about play as well, as part of exploration. Because I mean, as a parent now, I'm aware that a lot of what we talk about when we talk about child brain development and healthy social development, things like that, is this element of play and exploration that's really so critical for young children to be able to do that. And it's so funny. I think I read somewhere that your learning patterns are fixed by something ridiculous like age 5 or something. And so learning to do that early is so important. And then if you don't learn those skills, to go back and learn them as an adult, I think it's fundamentally far more difficult to do that as an adult than a child, right?
I think it's like learning a foreign language. If you pick it up as a child, how much different that is than when you're older. It's not that you can't do it. It's just going to be more challenging. And I think that's what I would remind people is it's not that you can't do it. Thank God for neuroplasticity and that we can always learn new things.
Yeah.
But understand you're not doing it wrong if it's hard or challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, what do you think about, I mean, I feel like medicine feeds the need for certainty because it's it's one of the only professions, you know, as we said before, it's one of the only professions that gives you that long-term foresight. So we get used to having it, I think. And I do think it creates a kind of learned helplessness in many ways, because, I mean, for non-medics, this process of exploration is really a rite of passage that, you know, you do at a much earlier stage, you know, maybe late teens, early 20s. Like, you know, if you do a history degree, you wouldn't necessarily become a historian. You'd do various different things and you sort of figure out along the way. But this is what I found so hard when I left. I was going through this exploration stage so much later, and that made it much harder because, for one thing, it was quite disturbing to have no guaranteed hierarchy that, you know, planned out my entire career for me. And for another thing, it felt like there was already so much pressure and expectation, you know, because I wasn't just an 18-year-old out there experimenting and playing the field or whatever. I was a fully fledged adult professional. So, yeah, I mean, exploring really made me feel young in many ways, which is odd because I was only 26 at the time. But I'd never had the opportunity to do that when I was, you know, quote unquote young. So yeah, I do wonder whether the hierarchy of medicine, it puts us in a certain mindset that makes it then very difficult for us to explore when we leave.
Mm-hmm. I think I would call it, I don't know that it would be like helplessness. I think it's that false sense of security is maybe more how I would play it. And in the sense of like, if I do this, then I become a junior faculty. And then if I do that, then I am a mid-level attending. And then, you know, like, it's that sense of security that if I just do the right things, then everything will work out okay. And now I think going through the pandemic, we like all realize that like our locus of control is so minute. So we just have to get used to, you know, being uncomfortable with what life is at this point. And I think maybe in other career paths, they learn that easier. Well, it's like, think about now in marketing, how many times people change jobs, and it's not for a bad thing. It's just like, oh, I'm at this firm now, or no, actually I'm doing this type of work. And in medicine, like, you change and people are like, what is going on? Do you have cancer? You know, like, how
Yes.
unrealistic is that? It's like, well, why would you better, you know, and in our minds, somewhere we get, I call it the hidden curriculum. And it's not evidently the things that were told to us, but it's like, it's that those unspoken lessons that you learned or that you saw the behaviors witnessed in, you know, your training years and even but beyond. But I remember the first time I was working as a first year resident, and they're like, oh, Dr. Such and Such, she just works part-time. And it's like,
Right.
the message from that was, she's not a good doctor. She's not putting in as much work as us. She is lazy. And now looking at it, I'm like, we should all work part-time. We'd be a whole bunch happier if we did this. But I think it's that like proverbial messaging, like everybody's talking about echo chambers right now. Like medicine, we get stuck in this echo chamber that we don't even realize that we're stuck in. And then when you start exploring and you kind of get outside of the box, you're like, wow, there's a whole world. Did you know people don't work on Fridays? Oh my gosh. You know?
It's mind-blowing, isn't it?
Yes.
No, I mean, I think you're so right. There is this rat race to the end somehow, you know, that if you just put in the time now and try your best, and then you become a consultant or, you know, or an attending or whatever, and then you reach the end. But I meet so many doctors who reach that point and then think, is this it? You know,
like, then
now
what?
Yeah, exactly. Got a comment coming through from Hannah. Completely agree with you both. A toxic environment, even outside of medicine, needs to be changed to nurture the people within that environment, rather than forcing people to just deal with the abuse and negativity that's forced on them. Yeah, no, I think that's so right. And yeah, I mean, I have found that environment outside of medicine as well, as Hannah is saying. But what's weird is that I am far better at recognizing outside of medicine that it's toxic than I was within medicine. I think within medicine, it's, as you say, because it's such a ingrained culture in everybody.
It's the pathologic normal.
Yeah, precisely. That is the perfect way to describe it.
That's how I tell people all the time. It's the pathologic normal. And like everyone's suffering. So what's wrong with you, Wiseman? Why do you come smiling into clinic? Like, whoa, what happened? Kind of thing. And
Yeah.
that's where I think you can really recognize. And I'm so glad that as a culture, we're all talking about culture and like what that means. It's not evidently the words that are on the hallway of what the organization's mission statement is, but does that mission statement walk through the hallway? Is it felt? And
Absolutely.
I think that's one of the biggest problems right now is the culture of medicine, that people don't love their work. They're just doing it for the patient. They're doing it because of some guilt. They're doing it because this is what I said I would always do, and I'm too scared to look otherwise. When if big scale organizations would look and say, like, not only should we take care of patients, but like our most important resource are our people. And if we took care of them, oh my God, think how great patient care would be.
Yeah.
It blows my mind that we don't talk more about this, that we're not seeing more fundamental shifts. Here in the US, I do a lot of consulting work and talking to hospitals and talking to medical executive committees and like showing them the numbers of what burnout is costing them versus if you actually like did physician wellness and you did it in the right way, look how much you would save. Even though, right now that the cost estimate is you need to spend between 1 and 2,000 US dollars on a physician a year extra on top of their compensation to help with wellness measures. Right now, if a doctor leaves an organization, it's right around $750 to $1 million for replacement, recruitment, new doctor training, all of that to plug them back in. Not talking,
Wow.
also thinking about like patient lost time, not having those visits, losing staff. So, if you have a medical staff of 200, you spend $200,000, and the ROI on that is it's there. Why would you not do that to not lose one doctor?
No, I mean, absolutely. Financially, it completely makes sense. And when you put it like that, the mind boggles as to why we don't do that. I'd like to come back to a point that I mentioned earlier, because I'd like to have your opinion on this, Erin. I mentioned that there are lists out there that you can Google about alternative careers for doctors. And I remember Googling those lists myself, and nothing stood out to me. And so then I was worried that, oh no, there won't be anything out there that I like and that I can do. So I'm wondering whether you come across this issue at all in your practice, and how do you deal with it?
Oh, absolutely. Because again, we are all researchers. So we're going to go like dig and find what it is and read through the list and be like, okay, pharmaceuticals, probably not. Sales rep, probably not. Clinical, and like looking through all of that, or, changing to a different clinical, like, am I going from out of the pan into the fire? Like, not really sure I want to do this. There are some great resources to at least start educating yourself. One of my good friends here in the US, she wrote Look for Zebras. It's 50 non-clinical careers everyone should consider. Dr. Silva Stacy is her name. And I think that's great as like a research start and to look. But at the end of the day, like, you need to really tap into like, what do you really want to do? Like you mentioned in the intro, I know so many cool doctors who are cartoonists, or they do animal rescue, or they run a ranch, or, like, the sky is really the limit. And so like narrowing it down to be like, I can only do this is like taking a pharmaceutical list of like 10 drugs and being like, okay, you can only use this to treat people. When we know that there's all sorts of other therapies that we can pull in and try, and that like it's an individual prescription for each person, that it works differently in different folks. I don't think those lists are bad. I think it's a good place to like crack open the surface, but to know like there's so much more. And a lot of times you don't know like what the else is until you
Yeah.
start talking to people who are kind of like us, who have done things differently and tried different things, and going through the exploration process and tell you like, hey, you're probably not going to get it right the first time. That's okay. Totally
Yeah,
okay.
it's so true. It's so true. And it's so funny because honestly, that is not what people want to hear. You know,
Oh
it's
no.
that
I want to pay
I mean,
money and I want to be fixed.
yeah, exactly. And I do think that if you're completely reliant on things like those lists, you're thinking about it the wrong way. Because looking at a list of jobs, I mean, it's funny that you compare it to like a set of drugs, because I think of looking at a list of jobs when you're thinking about changing careers is a bit like looking at a potential, set of treatments without doing a patient history, without doing examinations or any investigations first. I think it's equivalent to that, because there are questions, right? There are questions that need to be answered first, like, what do you want from a job? What do you want from life? What are you interested in? What are your values? That's a big one. And those are notoriously difficult questions to answer because, I mean, especially for medics, because we have no idea of that. We never get asked those questions. We never ask ourselves those questions. And yet, if you have an idea of those things, then you give yourself a far greater probability of being able to find something that both suits you and meets your needs, your family's needs. And yeah, it's so funny because I mean the most advice I think anyone ever gave me as a doctor in medicine on this sort of thing was really shitty stuff, like don't be a surgeon because you'll have no quality of life, and you're a woman, so if you want a family then you should be a GP. That is the kind of bullshit level of career thinking that we're used to. And so when my mentor, when I was leaving, when he asked me, what do you want and what are your values? I didn't even know where to start. I mean, it was actually only when I was going through the process of exploration that I began to answer those things,
Well, and I think that's a really good point to say is like, you don't have those answers when you first start.
Yeah.
And it's through kind of reconnecting, because I almost feel like I became a shell of myself. Like I scooped out all my insides and put those on a shelf because I just needed to do the job. But at some point, like I changed. I had 3 kids at some point, and like that blew my world up. Just so many things. Who I was as a person had changed. I mean, I lost my whole 20s through education. And so that all changed. And being like, who am I now? One of the questions that I still think about, that coach I told you about in the introduction, that she asked me was, what is the one thing in your life that if it was taken away would be most devastating? And the thing I said at the time was my medical license. I didn't say my family. I didn't say, like the things that really were, because my priorities were so screwed up at that time. Like I didn't even know. And now I look back at that and I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Like that's what I said. But it reminds me, like, that was the headspace that I was in. Like, if I don't have my medical license, I don't have anything. But it's like, no. And she helped me like see the other side of that and be and know, like, yeah, that felt really true at that point. But as I started to dig in, I'm like, oh no, my medical license was important to me because that was how I was taking care of my family. So the deeper was, but until you sit with those questions and until you try to identify like what that is, like one of my questions for people when I talk to them is, and I mentioned it, how do you want to feel when you get up in the morning?
I love that.
My biggest goal when I was making my transition and change is I wanted a job that I didn't have to take a vacation from, and I didn't want to wake up in the morning with an alarm clock. Like that was my 2 criteria that I was trying to like structure this new life around. And I'm really glad that was my criteria because it really opened up the boundaries with it. And so now today, like occasionally I have to set my alarm clock for early morning stuff, but most of the time I don't. And like that's what I would encourage people. Like, I think in medicine, sometimes those like crazy thoughts that we think about, or that we get told, oh, that's really unrealistic, or no, that's not attainable. No, if it's in you, it is there for a reason. So listen to it. But I think we're so afraid sometimes to like speak that out. Like people will see our crazy, and we're like, can't do that. Like, got to keep this mask on to how we do it. So I encourage people to write that down. Like, what is that thing in the bottom of your heart that you're so excited about, but that you don't tell anybody about? That is what you need to follow.
Yeah, and that can be so hard even to know what that is. I certainly found that really hard to describe when I was first leaving medicine. And I really resonate with what you said about your medical license, because I feel like we medics tend to worry a lot about wastefulness. My educational supervisor, he was the sort of person who was looking after my career at the time, was when I said I was leaving medicine, she said to me, "You're wasting your life." Which obviously is a ridiculous thing to say, but it's similar to the vein of, you being so worried about your medical license, because that shows the mindset of our profession. That shows the place that we are in and the people around us, the place they're in. And, I think we tend to think that if you can't immediately see an obvious link between your current actions and your larger goal, then that's wasted somehow, whereas now my attitude is completely different. I mean, yeah, okay, I'm not working clinically as a doctor anymore, but I use my medical degree all the time. I would not have the authority to be a career coach for doctors if I was not an ex-doctor. In my work as a marketer, my clients hugely, they value my background, because it's so rare to have both medical and marketing experience in one person. So, for industries like health tech and for pharma, that is incredibly useful. So yeah, my mantra now is that nothing is ever wasted, right?
No, and that's why I keep my big diploma right behind my head to remind me no one will ever take that away from me. Never take that away from me. And I see we got in the comments about like leaving medicine and no longer like being doctor and having that a part of our personality. Yes. Yes. Like when I remember again in my early journey, and what I now help people do is like, give me the adjectives to describe who you are. And like I kept going to nouns. I was like, well, I'm a doctor and I'm a mom and I'm a wife and she's like, no, adjectives. And so that's what I remind people too, is like your identity is what you want it to be, whatever shape, color, size, but doctor will always be a part of your fiber. And I don't even know that you have to call yourself like ex-doctor anymore. You're just no longer practicing. Like you're still doctor. You will always be a doctor. And that's a part of who you are. And no one can take that away from you. Unless they come to my house and strip that off my wall, which I doubt. And if they do, it's still a part of my story. And that's the important thing to remember too, is digging and finding and being like, well, who am I if everything is stripped away? And I think you'll be surprised with those answers.
Yeah, no, I mean, that resonates so much. I mean, when I first left medicine, I'd go to parties and people would ask you, so what do you do? And I remember being so embarrassed, because, ever since I was 17 years old, I've had an incredibly impressive answer to that question. I've been able to either say I'm in medical school, or I've been able to say I'm a doctor. And there's a certain amount of respect and, prestige that comes, with that announcement. People are like, oh, wow, you must be really clever. They make assumptions that you must have it all together in your life. So contrast that suddenly with, I just left my job as a doctor and now I'm trying a few things out. It doesn't pack quite the same punch. Especially the way that I was saying it, I think, which was absolutely full of guilt and shame and anxiety, and
because it was the message you were telling yourself, so that's what you were telling out into the world. I help my clients with this all the time as they're going for new job interviews, or that they're just exploring and looking like what the possibility is. Like, how do you set up an email to tell a colleague like what you're doing? And I'm like, just be honest. Be like, I'm looking for new possibilities. End of sentence. Or I'm looking for new possibilities and I'm kind of thinking the idea of X, Y, and Z. And then giving yourself the permission to be like, and tomorrow it may change to ABC.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And not to be afraid of, I think a lot of medics are very judgmental. And I was certainly very judgmental when I first left medicine, and I didn't even realize I was really. I think if you told me at the beginning of med school I ended up in marketing, I'd have been like, what happened to me? Did I become the devil himself? Like, how did I fuck up so badly that I ended up in marketing? Because I had a perception about what that meant. And, and working in pharma, like there's this thing, like if you're in pharma, then you're working for the dark side. When actually, like, you don't have to work for GSK. You don't have to work for the big ones, the ones with a bad reputation. You could work in pharma and be doing very, very varied roles and very different things for very different types of companies. And I didn't know any of this when I left. So I made sweeping judgments about entire professions and entire career options before even trying to explore them. And I think that really held me back,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think it's really important to like have someone to help you check those biases, like when they come up. Like when I throw an idea out to my clients about like, well, what if you apply? I could never apply for that job. Well, why not? Like, well, and usually it's bias that then comes out of like, well, usually people who do that is because they couldn't hack it. And I'm like, really? You think so? And really like poking holes in that. I mean, look at us. We're coaches. People are like, in my head, sometimes I think people are a little bit judgy about like, what does she mean? She sits at home and coaches people. What does that even mean? And it's because there's that lack of understanding. But then when they hear like, oh, she doesn't get up with an alarm clock in the morning, and oh, she really likes her job. Oh, and her kids aren't starving on the streets. Yeah, it sounds pretty sweet, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And
and I think at some point you just have to realize what's true for you. And you've got to turn down the external voices and turn up the internal voice.
Yeah. I mean, something I think that is connected with that is something I see a lot of, which is the desire to have it all figured out immediately. Often when people come to me wanting career changes, they are putting huge amounts of pressure on themselves to immediately find the perfect job. Whereas, as you said before, it doesn't happen that way. This job has to be fulfilling, it has to pay right, it has to have, a certain amount of progression.
I can't move. That's another one.
It has to have the perfect team, has to be in the right industry, has to be like noble in the same way medicine was, and like helping people in a certain way. And, in many ways, I was the same. When I left medicine, I was like, well, I've quit the most noble profession on earth and I've given up on this amazing path. So now I have to replace it with something that is equally amazing and fantastic, because otherwise I can't prove to everybody else or to myself that I made the right decision,
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you this question. So when people come to you, and then I want to answer it too. When people come to you on that trajectory of like, I need a change and I need a change now, what would you say is like the typical timeline that actually happens?
In terms of how long it takes for someone to leave?
To leave, to find something new, to kind of be in that transition.
It's really interesting. I would say that about 80% of my clients, everybody comes to me knowing that I'm the coach who helps people leave medicine. But 80% of them end up not leaving, which is really interesting. And it's often the people who come to me saying, I need to leave right now. I hate this. And they reel off a list of things that they hate. It is often those people who end up actually not quitting in the end, which is really interesting. And they end up a little bit like you, Erin. They carry on practicing just on their own terms. Now, there is a small amount of people, a small percentage who do quit altogether, but they tend to be people who definitely know that they want to quit, as in there is no doubt in their mind that medicine is absolutely not the right profession for them. And even though they might have some niggling doubts over what they're doing, and they might feel anxiety and guilt about it, they know deep down that medicine isn't the one. Whereas for the majority cohort, it is, I think it's more about questions of things like burnout and frustration and, internal conflicts and issues, So in terms of the timelines, as you were asking, it varies so much for the people that I work with. And generally the people, the smaller percentage who absolutely know they're going to leave, they leave much faster, say within months or weeks even, versus the people who want to change the way that they practice medicine to be more healthy for them. It tends to take a little bit longer. What about you?
That's great. Yeah, because like I see parallel universes again with that. So like the people who are like, I am done, F it, I am out. A lot of times just making some small critical shifts, they are like, oh, like, no, actually this is okay now.
Yeah.
And it's like those who are pretty assured and just need like just a little bit extra to change, they do. What I encourage my people a lot of times when they're thinking about, but they're not quite sure, like, what is like the dream job? Like, what is my forever job that I want to do? And I remind them, like, forever is not forever. It's just like a period of time. But anyway,
Yeah.
I talk to them about bridge jobs. So your current situation, you're saying is so horrible and so toxic. Just like an abusive relationship, you don't stay in that. So what's your bridge job that gets you from point A to point B so you can be in a healthier spot that then you can continue your journey and keep seeking with that. So that's one way that I've seen a lot of my people kind of find that bridge job, knowing that that's not going to be their forever place. It's just for the right now. And it's something that they can do for 12 to 18 months or sometimes shorter while they're kind of like figuring their stuff out, if it's that miserable and that terrible. For other ones, as far as if they are totally exiting out of medicine, like you said, it's parallel universe with you. When I talk about like people who are crispy with burnout, like I was, bottom of the barrel, like just done, I really see that you have to give yourself time to heal through that. You didn't get burned out in 4 weeks. You're not going to be healthy in 4 weeks. And so
Absolutely.
that I tell people anywhere from like 12 to 18 months. So like as we're talking about these like exploration questions and that sort of thing. And I know of course there's somebody sitting there like, I don't got 12 months. It's like, okay, then that's when we talk about the bridge job. We talk about like making adaptations in your work, changing your schedule, pushing back, renegotiating your contract for the time that you do have there, all of those kind of like coping skills. But I really do tell people like this is not an overnight thing. And like really normalize the process of like, okay, you're going to hate me right now because I'm going to tell you you're not quitting your job tomorrow. But 12 months from now, 18 months from now, when you look back, you're going to be changed. It is going to be different, either externally, but more importantly, internally.
No, that's really interesting. And do you have people, I mean, I get a lot of people who ask me, in that time, should I be doing an extra qualification? Should I be doing a master's degree? They always talk about master's degrees. And they'll have an idea of which degree they want to do, but then I'll talk to them and say, well, do you actually want to do that?
Why are you doing that? Yes. What is your underlying purpose? Well, I feel like I need to. And it's like, why do you feel like you need to? Well, I need to be doing something with productive with my time. And I'm like, so like figuring out who you are and what you want, that's not productive with your time. And yes, you do not need another freaking piece of paper to prove your worth in the world. Now, if you really do want to go get a degree in psychology or like you said, a master's or like a PhD, and you can tell me why you want to do it and the reasons, and you've always wanted to do it, but you didn't do it because instead you went, the medical track. Okay, I can get on board with that. But if you're just, it's the people who are like the perpetual students. Like eventually at some point you have to look at them and be like, are you scared? Like that. A lot of times going into a degree program, from what I see from my people, it's because that's the least scary step to take.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's an element as well, I think, of, you said about the piece of paper, like in medicine, you get used to being continuously assessed and being through continuous courses or whatever. Like you need a fucking piece of paper signed off just so you can do a cannula, for God's sake. But there comes a point where I say to people, look, it doesn't work like that outside of medicine. You do not necessarily need a qualification in order to get into a profession. Like I don't have a marketing degree. I'm not trained formally, and yet I have a successful career in marketing. So the mindset, I think, is very difficult, very different.
I've never taken a class in broadcasting in my life, but my podcast is like through the roof. It's so I think, again, it's like reevaluating, like, why are you doing this? And then I think it's funny because we just talked about, like, as physicians, we want to gain more. And I see it on the entrepreneurial side when people are like, well, I have to build my website and I have to do this and I have to do that. And like, very much like, I chose this, so I have to do it. And I'm like, actually, in the world, like, do you remember when you had like nurses you worked with and like assistants and like therapists? Like, you didn't do everything for your patient. You're not going to do everything for your business. So outsource. That is, I think, a huge key for what I see too, is people who are transitioning, because then they get overwhelmed and they get burned out when they're an entrepreneur. And I'm like, this is not why you did this. You did this so that you could have freedom, so that you could be the boss. So be the boss.
Yeah, I love that. Don't take your burnout with you, in short.
Oh, yeah. Because that is the thing that I do tell people. No matter where you go, you take yourself with you.
Yeah.
So yeah, you may remove from a toxic environment, but you now then have to do the work on yourself, because you're going to repeat those patterns if you're not working on those. And just like burning medicine, I've seen the same thing happen. I'll work with somebody and then they give me a call 2 years later and they're burned out in whatever they went into next. And I'm like, okay, let's start the work again.
No, that's something I see very commonly too. Erin, in the last few minutes before we go, I think we should sort of explore the other side of exploration, because it is all well and good talking about the benefits of it, but I'd like to talk about, I get a lot of doctors who, a bit like the question earlier, who are contacting me as parents, who have certain commitments, certain lifestyles to uphold, maybe are supporting members of their family. And we are both parents too. We know that, this puts an added amount of pressure on you when you're trying to change career. And it can make the idea of exploration seem quite impossible in many ways, particularly when there's a risk of financial loss or instability. So what are your thoughts on the matter, and what advice would you give to people in that position?
I go back to my son, who at the time when I was going through all of this, my oldest son was about 4 years old, and he's almost 9 now, because like I said, 5 years. And he looked at me the other day and he goes, Mom, I'm really glad that you're a happy mommy now. And I was like,
Gosh,
of all the income loss, of all the like sleepless nights, for him to know, like, I mean, he was 4 years old. How did he know that I was, but he did, obviously. That's why you have to figure out why you want the change. And for me, it was my children. I didn't want them to grow up with mommy's at the hospital still, or mommy seeing patients, or, hey, I can't go to your soccer game. I got to go, I got to call. Or I realized I didn't have these little creatures just so that I could like have little creatures. Like, I wanted to be an integral part of it. So I think really understanding when you are doing this, it is going to be tough, and there are going to be tough aspects about it, but you do hard things. And so really understanding, like, why am I do this? So with the financial impairment, I always talk to people about having that savings account. Most of us, when you're making that good large income, you are sacking money away. And so what is a savings account for? When you come on hard times. Is this hard times? Then it's time to start using that money. And understanding that, like, that's what you did it for. That's what you maybe subconsciously didn't know was going to happen, but that's what you were stocking up for, is understanding that. Looking at your budget. We all could trim down our budget a lot, especially again with the inflated, and maybe that might be making some hard decisions on where you're currently living. What things do you have that are more wants than needs, and how do you liquidate those to help you out? Because like, I sold my like gorgeous couch. It was like my prize thing when I got my big girl Dr. I wanted this like beautiful sofa, and I ended up selling it because, well, I had little kids and I knew they were going to wreck it. But 2, I was like, we just need a regular couch. Like, we don't need the extravagantness. And then later on down the road, I'll get a new couch, and probably it'll be a different color because that one would have been out of style at that point anyway. So it's really trimming down the budget and saying, like, what is our rock bottom? What must we have to quote unquote survive? And understanding where that savings account is, understanding making hard choices now for your family is only going to benefit them in the future. They will thank you, because I am so glad that I changed when my little ones were 4, 2, and newborn, rather than waiting till they were 18, 16, 14. And then I was navigating, teenage years, or trying to send people to college. And, there's never a perfect time. So why not just start now? And that's what a lot of people are asking with COVID. Like, what do you quit in a pandemic? Like, are you serious? And I'm like, there's never a perfect time. Like, it's either now or you wait it out. And like, so let's just be honest. Like, and that's fine. If you want to wait it out, perfectly okay. But you have permission now. And I would encourage you, if you're even having an inkling to think about it, just open up that exploration, that curiosity, understand why you want to do it, and then just start looking and saying, what if I did that?
Yeah, I love that. I think that's amazing advice, and a fantastic way to end this conversation. Erin, thank you so much again for joining me. That was so fun and just so lovely to talk to you. If people want to reach out to you, then how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, come listen to more Erin Wiseman sass on Doctor Me First. It's a fun podcast. Oh my gosh. It's been incredible over the last 2 years to see how it's grown and just metamorphosized. I'm doing kind of a fun series right now called Married to an Alpha Female, where I have my husband on. So we talk a lot about the relationship stuff of like going through the transition from, he's not a physician, from his side as husband, as non-doctor, as like scared shitless, what that was like and how it changed our relationship. And it was hard, but also I'm grateful for it, because I think we're stronger now more than ever, because it made us learn how to communicate. It made us really tackle a lot of fears that we both didn't realize that we had. And it's also really helped us set up like expectations for the future. And why do we want these? Why, and so just come hang out and look at that. Of course, I'm on the internet. Just Google my name. You'll find my website. I love hanging out on Instagram right now. Facebook, sorry, I know you guys are viewing from there, but Instagram is so much more fun. And of course, how we found each other through LinkedIn. I think it is amazing that we can have a global community and that we can talk about these issues in bigger ways than just in our little pockets that we have in our corner of the world.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Thank you again. This has been amazing, an absolute pleasure. And I will talk to you soon, Erin.
Absolutely. See ya.
Bye. Bye. Oh, wasn't she brilliant? I love Erin. She's fantastic. I'm so excited that I got to introduce her to you guys tonight. And I think it's a great conversation and exploration. It's not all easy. It's not all a bed of roses, but my God, is it worth it? So we are at the end of the show. Thank you so much again, guys, for coming tonight. I'm actually taking a couple of weeks off now, much needed holiday before work commitments start to step up again. But as I mentioned earlier, I have a special surprise for you. On Sunday, August 23rd, I'm going to be doing a special bonus live stream with not one, but 2 guests. And those guests happen to be none other than my very own brand new Disillusioned Medic team. Yes, I am so thrilled to announce that I have recently started working with 2 incredible women, Dr. Hannah Ali and Dr. India Duane. You might already have seen them floating around on my social media. Hannah's here tonight. You can see that she often comes and she comments on these reflective practices. They have been managing my website and my marketing respectively and doing an absolutely stellar job. So if you've noticed improvements to my platform lately, that is all them. I cannot take any of the credit. So yeah, I mean, Hannah and India are both ex-medics as well. So they have some fascinating insights and brilliant experiences to share. So I'm really looking forward to having them on the show, and together we're going to be tackling the theme of professionalism. So yeah, I'm so honored to have them on board. They've been a massive support to me. I can't wait for you to see them too. So join us on the 23rd. And then the following day on 24th of August, which is a Monday, I have another bonus live stream for you. I'm going to be talking about my why and sharing with you what real reflective practice is all about, why I'm so passionate about it, and why I started doing this show. So yes, please do join me for those special streams. And if you have any questions for me or any reflections, or for my new team, shoot them over to me at drangelipereira@gmail.com. Thanks, everyone. Good night and take care. And as always, stay inspired. Bye.